I've started reading your book. I've got it here. I took it with me. I've got it here. This book here. It's
I'm
good.
so honored.
It's really good. I love it. I love transparency. I love it when people are brave enough to share a bit of their story. It's sort of like what I do with anxiety and
I
panic
love that.
disorder and stuff like that. But yeah, I thought it'd be nice to have you on today to do a bit of a Q&A and yeah, just find out a bit more about you. So over to you, Tana. Who are you? What are you about? Let's talk about it.
So I am Tana Amen, often known as the lovely wife or the brain doctor's wife, which is so funny. I think it's because people can't actually pronounce my name or they're not sure about it. My husband is Dr. Daniel Amen. So I do have a name. It's Tana, like Tana Banana. And I'm vice president of Amen Clinics. I'm a neurosurgical ICU nurse by training, but now I focus mostly on lifestyle changes for people with mental health conditions because lifestyle matters. It matters a lot. And yeah, and I've been through a lot myself, which I never thought I would share with the world, but I apparently am. So,
Excellent.
as you said, transparency.
Excellent, excellent. And obviously, what was the impetus behind doing that then? Because I mean, I remember when I did it and I released my books and I thought, I want to make this different from other books. I want to actually show people I've been there and I can kind of relate to what they're going through. What was the impetus for you to do that?
You know, I think it's a process. So I've had people come up to me and say, you know, wow, you know, I want my life to be like yours. You know, I had one lady come up to me and start crying, and she was from like Nigeria. She's crying and she said, I follow everything you do and I pray every day that God will do for my life what he's done for yours. And that if you can do it, I can do it. And I thought, she doesn't really know. She knows the little bit that I've shared. I had been very guarded. So I always kept everything pretty close to the vest. The only thing I shared was a few things when I was actually doing nutrition coaching. And so, but I never really shared the dark, dirty stuff. And so, and I thought, you know, it's really hard to do that because if you share your nutrition advice, if you share, you know, your lifestyle advice and people don't like it, you know, so what? But if you share the stuff that's really sensitive, the stuff that's really hard that you've been through and people criticize you, you've got to be ready for that. And so for a long time, I thought, well, I did my work. I've done my therapy. Good for me. I don't need to tell anybody. No one needs to know. As long as I feel more whole, as long as I feel more healthy, so what? Nobody needs to know all this stuff except my husband. He was my biggest cheerleader. When Daniel heard all this stuff that from my past, he kept saying, "You really need to share this."
Go, Tana, go.
Yeah. And so he kept trying to push me to do it. And at first I was like, you're out of your mind. I'm not telling people this stuff. And, you know, I started to notice my daughter, my teenage daughter, when she hit her teens and adolescence, she started struggling with a lot of stuff, as most teens do. But I thought, you know, she's ready to hear some of this stuff in an age appropriate way. And I started sharing things. And I thought, just there's so many things that people, if they knew that other people were going through them or had been through them, maybe they wouldn't feel the shame. Maybe they wouldn't feel alone. Maybe they, you know, maybe it's my responsibility to some degree. And
yeah, and again though, that I mean, that's such an admirable jump to take because obviously it's everyone's right to have their own kind of private life and their personal life, but also it's very empowering and encouraging for others when you do show them a bit of that. Whether, and for some people, if it's just a bit, that's nice. For some people, when they lay the cards on the table, it can be very powerful. I'm part of the latter in what I've read so far in your book. I think you are too.
yeah.
Also, if you're just really nosy, read the book. It's funny. Like, oh, it's someone's life. She doesn't know anything about mine. But yeah, no, I think it's really powerful. I did obviously I work a lot with anxiety attacks and things, and I'll still get them from time to time, very rarely. And I promised someone not so long ago, I said, listen, if I do have an anxiety attack again, I'll practice what I preach and I'll record it. And I did one of these live things while I was recording, which was terrifying in itself. I was out having a walk somewhere and I recorded myself having a panic attack. And actually the amount of people it inspired to get out and challenge that panic attack and showing that actually I wasn't freaking out on the floor or crying I mean, I do that anyway, but it was nothing to do with a panic attack. And I was running around and I thought, actually, that was very vulnerable of me to share it, but it inspired others. And then if you go full circle, I actually found it quite empowering to do that. And I'm
You know, it's
so
funny, my
glad that you're
husband would
doing
tell
that too.
people, my husband tells people all the time, if they're having a panic attack or anxiety attack, don't leave, like
No.
go through it. So go through it, not don't run from it. And so he'll give them steps to do that. So that's just brilliant. To have other people go on that journey with you is brilliant.
Yeah, and yeah, I just thought it's nice. You can use things like that to empower you and things like that.
Right.
Okay. Tell us a bit more then about kind of what I get from this book already. Is this the word that comes to mind is the word resilience. Tell us a bit more about your resilience and how resilience is important to kind of get through stuff.
So, you know, it's people who've gone through a lot, if they've been through childhood trauma, if they've been through sexual trauma, if they've been through self-induced trauma from bad decisions. I mean, some of us have done that too.
Don't know what you're talking about.
All of that.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So all of those things apply to my life. But you know, we tend to minimize a lot of times. So some people get really stuck in it and they just hyper focus on it, and they'll be sort of stuck in that victim role. And this isn't a judgment. It's just like some people do that. And then other people will do what I did, put on a mask, which, by the way, neither one of these are really very healthy. Put on a mask, act like it's not a big deal, even though it's eating you away inside. And they'll use all sorts of tools to pretend like it wasn't a big deal. So for me, it was through accomplishment. It's like, if I accomplish enough, if I'm perfect enough, if I, you know, hair, makeup, like all of that stuff, if I look put together enough, people will not see how broken and what a mess I am, and, you know, how unworthy I am, if you will. And I thought if they really knew me, they couldn't love me. I mean, that's why we don't really share ourselves with people, isn't it? Because people knew the truth, they couldn't love me. And so, you know, or they would reject me. And rejection is just a terrible feeling. And so, I mean, a hallmark sign of resilience, believe it or not, is when we minimize things. Now, it may not be the healthiest way to handle it, but people who have been through a lot tend to minimize it to get through it if they're resilient. It's like, well, other people have had it worse.
Any kind of excuse to kind of put your needs and emotions at the forefront of things. Right. Yeah, it's almost like constructing things. As you were talking about that, I'm a psychotherapist, so as you were talking about that, I was reminded of the great Carl Rogers, and he talks about conditions of worth, and how, you know, when you're using those words there, if I do this, if I do that, if I do that, then I will be satiated, I will be happy, I will do that. But also it's for a lot of people as well, and people don't really talk about this, when you're constructing this version of yourself that you think is impenetrable, that is kind of immune to criticism, immune to rejection, that's actually quite a fun project. And people don't realize that. I can dress this person, I can put makeup on this person, I can play around with this person's personality, and we absolutely get swept up in it, particularly from a younger age.
Oh, absolutely.
And then, but so people are like, it's not just like, oh, why did you do that? People actually like you. No, actually, it's fun to do as well. And then we do lose ourselves. So Carl Rogers says this congruent, authentic you goes this way, you know, hi Tana, bye Tana, and this new I can't be hurt Tana goes this way. And over time they go far, 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 far until you end up in therapy because you realize, I feel lost, I don't feel lost.
That was a brilliant way to just explain. I've never really put it that way or heard it put that way, but that's brilliant, because I felt like all authenticity was sort of gone, and I felt like I was just sort of broken inside and empty inside, and I felt like at certain points in my life I became the very thing I hated, and so that's a really bad feeling. That's a really empty feeling when it's like you can recognize that you're behaving in a way that you don't like. But you don't really know what to do about it anymore. It's like a runaway train or a roller coaster that's about to go off the rails, and you don't really know what to do about it anymore. But you've created this person, and in my case, I actually thought that this is a lie that'll really mess with your head. I thought that it's what people expected of me. I thought that it was like it was created for me. But no, I did that, and so I wanted to take one of the words that changed my life so dramatically. Changed the trajectory of my life was responsibility, not blame, responsibility, the ability to respond. So no matter what situation I encounter now, rather than saying, oh, that's my fault, I don't say that, but I'll look in the mirror and go, what can I do? What are my opportunities right now? What's the opportunity available to me? Even right now with this COVID thing, what are the opportunities, right? I might not like what's happening, but I've got opportunities.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. When was the point then where you thought, I mean, there's a lot of people actually, some lovely comments actually during this live. It's usually people insulting my haircut or something. But like, some other comments. Where was the point then? So if we look at it like this, usually, well, for me, and I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, I started to experience things in my body where I was like, it was almost like my body's way of saying, nah, mate, you've got to change something here. And I started to experience dissociation and things like that. I used to literally start to, you know, the old trauma response where you just kind of, I started to like see myself in third person. I started to not feel here, the anxiety and the panic, which obviously everyone knows that I talk about and stuff. What was it for you? When was the moment for you where you're like, yeah, maybe not?
So there were two times, and I think, you know, so they say that when you decide to get well, it doesn't happen in a straight line. It happens in a jagged line usually, right? So we get a little better, then we drop back down, but maybe not all the way to the bottom. Then you get better, then you drop down, but maybe not as low as before. You know, there's these rises and falls, and it's in the down times that we learn the most if we pay attention. So it's not when things are going great, we're not paying attention, but when we hurt, we tend to pay more attention. So I'd say, you know, I went through some rough things early on in life, and developed an eating disorder that I was like sort of secretly not telling anybody. Again, you know, I learned to transfer all that anxiety. I had a ton of anxiety, transfer that into exercise. So I just figured out how to purge in a different way so that, you know, I wasn't going to
like that word, purge.
Yeah, purge it all in a different way. But I wasn't healthy. And then after I got cancer at 23, I went into this wicked depression and wanted to die. And after that, went on the wrong medication, which sort of really could have ruined my life. So fortunately, I made some dumb decisions, but during that time, but came through that. But after that, I met some mentors, and that's when I learned about responsibility. That's when I learned about, you know, what it means to really love yourself and figure out who you are spiritually. These four circles: biology, psychology, social, spiritual. That we're not just one. You know, we're all four of those are like tires on a car, if you will. And so if one of those goes flat, car will drive a little while, but not very well. But if more than one goes flat, it's not going to drive. And in my case, they all went flat and my car flipped. So, you know, I had to figure out my biology, which is the cancer I was going through. My thyroid, all sorts of stuff were out of whack. The psychology, how am I managing my thoughts? Am I listening to the lies I'm telling myself? Am I disciplining my thoughts? The social circle, which is who are you hanging out with? Because people are contagious. And the spiritual circle, which is what gives your life meaning and purpose. Because purposeful people live longer. So as I began to understand all of that, I had a mentor that sort of helped me through this process early on. I started to get better, like a lot better. And then I went through a wicked divorce, but life doesn't happen in a straight line. I went through this wicked divorce later and kind of fell back down.
Okay.
It was after that I really started to figure out, okay, I need to get some help. Maybe I got those circles right, but I never really addressed the past trauma. I never really went back and figured out what caused it to begin with. So in functional medicine, we do functional psychiatry. We say, okay, it's one thing to just put Band-Aids over it, to just layer medications or to just layer, you know, to help people be better now and move forward. But if you don't get to the root cause, it's a little like putting Band-Aids over bullet holes. So helping people move through it and move on. Like what initiated that behavior to begin with? And that's when I really began to heal. And I used to hate the word whole. I'm like, what does whole mean? Like, what do you mean I'm whole? And I hated the word.
Let's heal you holistically.
Yes, I hated it.
Someone said that to me 10 years ago. I'd be like, shut off, mate.
Right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And acknowledging and taking responsibility for things that are happening too. I mean, for me, I'm a nerd when it comes to anxiety. And as a psychotherapist, when people walk through my doors, well, I say walk through, this is how I conduct sessions now. I mean, not live to the world, but like over video. And part of kind of looking at what's happening is I offer people the choice. So they come in, and if they come in with quite disordered anxiety, I'll say to them, listen, is it just a fear of fear? Has stress got loads? I mean, I'll share the analogy that I use. People might have heard it before, but basically, we all have a stress jug. The size of this stress jug depends on your your genetics. So my mum and dad were anxious as hell, so my stress jug isn't going to be very big, which is fine. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to get excessive anxiety, disordered anxiety, panic attacks, whatever. However, when stress hits that jug, it starts to fill up. So it could be day-to-day stress, like, money, relationships, occupation, job, a little bit of chronic health issues. It's fine. It's not enough to give you panic attacks. But then you factor into account everything that's in that jug. So let's say childhood abuse, grief, trauma, divorce, stuff like that. And when things fill up and fill up and fill up and fill up, the jug overflows. This is my theory, and I'm usually right. When the jug overflows, our trauma response kicks in, and that's when we start getting the panics, the depressions, the panic, the dissociations, the panic attacks, whatever. What I offer my clients when they come in, besides a cup of tea, is, listen, we can stop the jug from overflowing, so you can stop experiencing this really horrible trauma and whatever. Usually the fear of fear itself. So usually people panic and freak out, and then they're scared of panicking and freaking out. That's the first thing we deal with. And then the second option is, listen, are you happy now to are you equipped to deal with your jug if it's overflowing? They're like, yeah, that's cool, whatever. But what I love to do is exploring what's in that jug. And I think that's what's really nice about your book. It lays out a lot of what's in someone's jug that you've not considered, that you've tried to put band-aids over, or plasters if you're in the UK. And it's like you're just trying to do that. It's a bit like, what's in that jug? How much do you want to explore what's in that jug? Right. Because some people might have some bad stuff in that jug that, okay, they're never really going to process, and it's okay being there. But if there's something that's really heavy that's in there and they want to look at that, that's what I do as a therapist, and I offer them to look at that. It's a weird approach. I love it. I've been doing it for years, and it kind of sounds like what you've gone through. This jug, if we're going to use that metaphor, the jug was filling up and filling up, and it was fine, but you ignored it. It carried on and carried on and carried on and carried on, and then bam, it's unsustainable. You can't keep ignoring it anymore. And credit to you for facing it. Credit to you for facing it head on.
I love what you're saying. Actually, the interesting thing is I think the jug was overflowing way before I acknowledged it. So it's because, I think we often don't connect the dots. So for example, my uncle was murdered in a drug deal when I was 4, and it was a very traumatic event for me as a 4-year-old. And I write about that in the book. I never connected. My husband was the first one to connect this, and I thought he was ridiculous. I'm like, oh, that's just psychopathic.
Oh, really?
Stop shrinking me. Yeah, stop shrinking me. Because I'm one of those people who just be really tough, make it, be intense. So I practiced martial arts, not dance. I went to work in a neurosurgical ICU level A trauma unit, because I'm like, if I wear that mask, if I'm tough enough. But when I was 4, 2 weeks after that event with my uncle, after he was murdered, I was in the hospital receiving upper and lower gastrointestinal studies for severe stomach issues, for severe digestive issues. No one ever put together that maybe they were connected. I learned to hide at a really young age. I was very timid, and I learned to hide. And so it took me a long time to find my voice. And when I found it, I used it more as a weapon than as anything balanced or as anything positive. It took me a while to figure out how to use my voice in a positive way. And then I was really sick. I was a really sick kid, always on antibiotics, always in the hospital, but I also grew up in a lot of chaos. Yeah. So lots of chaos, lots of, I was always looking for that tiger around the corner. So if you grow up like that, rather than going out and exploring the world in a healthy way, like children are supposed to be able to do, I learned to hide. I learned to try to be invisible. And I had all these physical manifestations. Now, was I just an unlucky person? Was I just unhealthy? Maybe. But was part of it connected to what was going on in my life? Probably. And I didn't realize that. At 23, I got cancer that kept coming back, and it just was never ending. I've had 10 medical surgeries. But now fast forward, and now that I'm a little more psychologically savvy, I can look back and go, a lot of those events were connected to really intense situations in my life. Like they happened almost simultaneously. So, I think it's those 4 circles.
It's very empowering as well when you when things make, I don't know about you, but when things make sense, you suddenly feel a bit less lost. Like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, it's really, I'll share one with you now. I don't share this with many people, but why not? While we're in the spirit of doing it. I used to do stand-up comedy. I know, you're required to be funny to do that. I used to do stand-up comedy, and I remember once in Manchester where I live, and it was a really scary stand-up venue. And it was one of those moments where just you have an epiphany, like, oh my God, I know why I'm doing this. And I was about to go on stage and say my awful routine. It's not funny now, but I thought it was great back then. And just as I was going on, I was terrified. My heart was pounding and all these normal kind of things. But it just occurred to me, the reason why I do this is because the only kind of positive way to get something out of my father when I was growing up was to make him laugh. And that never occurred to me. It never occurred to me until I was 3 pints of beer deep in a comedy club, about to go on stage, and I went, oh my God.
Isn't that interesting when we have that?
Whoa. Like, oh, I know why I do this, and it was the things, it was relieving. I stopped doing stand-up comedy. I enjoyed it, but then I thought, I don't need to do this. It's fun, and then the anxiety just kind of lifted because I knew why I was doing it. And it's just like, you must have, what was it like when you saw yourself and gone, actually, I can see why I've been hiding all this time. This threat response is telling me to hide.
Oh yeah, so the title of my book is The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. That title came from an epiphany I had. So I was actually, mine isn't as lovely as yours, unfortunately. Mine came from the fact that I realized I was a judgmental witch at one point. I was on stage actually getting ready to speak to a group of recovering addicts at one of the largest inpatient chemical addiction recovery centers in the States.
This is already better than mine. I was just talking to a lot of drunk people in Manchester.
So, but at least you were funny. I was just like, I was like tortured by my own awful thoughts. And I'm standing on stage. I'm supposed to be speaking to these people. I didn't want to be there. I'd already had an argument with my husband over it. And I'm like, God picked the wrong person this time. I don't want to do this. And he looks at me with that irritating smile that only husbands and psychiatrists have, or maybe all shrinks have it. I don't know. But it's really irritating. And he's like, honey, God picked the perfect person. And I'm like, what do you know anyway? So fast forward, out of obligation, I go to this thing, and I'm like, how am I going to reach these people and teach them about gluten and dairy and the awful effects of these things when they're probably still jonesing for a pipe or a needle? I mean, these are the thoughts in my head. That's how awful I was. And it occurred to me, I'm having these thoughts. I mean, I knew I was having those thoughts because of my past, because of the addiction and the mental health issues that I grew up with, my uncle being a heroin addict who just wreaked havoc in my life. My other uncle who was murdered in a drug deal. I mean, I was having some pretty awful thoughts about these people. But I'm standing on stage and they're judging me as harshly as I'm judging them. And there's a really great scene that occurs in the book that talks about it, about how this woman like raises her hand. She's like, what would you know about my life? Look at you. Your life is perfect. And I stopped and I'm like, you know what? She is seeing exactly what I wanted her to see. I'm the one that put that mask on. I'm the one that does this every day. I'm literally standing on a stage dressed in, expensive shoes and with makeup on and hair. And I'm looking down at these people from the stage and she's seeing exactly what I wanted her to see. And it was just this, like, I had an epiphany in that moment. And so I just asked them, I'm like, how many of you are judging me? Because I'm judging you right now. And then I told them, I said, I'm going to tell you a story about a scared little girl. Her name was Tana. And I went back. And I realized that if I could go back to that time when we weren't addicts or judgmental witches or whatever you want to label us as, Democrats, Republicans, I don't care. Whatever your label is, black, white, whatever your label is you give people. If we could go back to that time when we were just all scared children, we were hiding, we were trying to be invisible, because most of us, especially people in that room, had been there. And all of a sudden I hit that place. I'm like, you know what? If I can just go back to that place before we all took a different fork in the road, I can connect with these people. And I looked out and that's what I saw was scared children. I saw people like me.
Well, that's a very compassionate and empathetic way to look at things. And I think for me, I wish I could say I was always like that. I wasn't. But actually, to see that this person has had their kind of, to avoid the cliche, but has had their own journey of their own. I think it's really important. And what's really nice is that there's people like you in your position that are modeling a great ideal way to share things like this. Okay, you know, you've gone above and beyond and just gone, you know, you want to know, oh, there it is, you know, kind of thing. But it's in general, I think it's one more step for society, in my opinion, when people are it's just a bit more normalized to talk about these things, because when you do that, you start to develop empathy in other people too.
Yeah.
Other people start to see you're scared in a child, in this and that, and stop like attacking each other and things like that.
Right.
I mean, I wish I was perfect. I'd sit here on my soapbox kind of saying, oh, we should be now. Catch me on a Sunday morning when I'm tired. I got no empathy, not a chance. But like in general, if it's normalized with people, I think that we're in a better place to kind of do that. Nice. Where can people find your book then, Tana? I've got this one here. There's mine. It's good. It gets the Josh thumbs up for transparency and honesty.
Thank you so much. So it's called The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. If you go to relentlesscourage.com, I actually have lots of free gifts to help people sort of change the narrative of their story, that word responsibility. Also to have a better understanding of the people in your life who might have hurt you. But you can actually buy it anywhere that great books are sold. And if you go to that site and enter your receipt number, we will still give you the gifts.
Nice. And who doesn't like a free gift? I do.
Right.
I used to walk around Camden in London, Camden Food Market. This isn't going to be interesting to you, but I'm going to share it anyway. I used to walk around Camden Food Market and used to get free samples. Yeah. But if you timed it just right and plotted your route perfectly, you could have an entire meal of world food for free.
Oh, we have a place like that here. Yeah, we have a place like that here. It's called Costco. People go there just to get the samples. So.
Yeah. And I've still not changed. I'm doing all right for a second. I've still not changed. Absolutely great. Thank you very much, Tana. A big love to you and big love to your husband as well, who also does amazing work. I'm jealous of what's happening in terms of the weather in California.
Yes.
I'm going to go and cry outside in the cold.
Yeah, it's lovely.
And hopefully we can do another one of these again sometime soon. It's really good.
Absolutely.
It's really, and it's lovely to connect as well using social media for wholesome content.
Thank you so much, Josh. Have a great day.
You too, Tana.
Have a great evening.
Yeah. Thank you for everyone tuning in. Thank you. Bye-bye.